In this video, we are going to talk about KiCad. However, we are not going to talk about schematic design or PCB layout. In this video, I would like to talk about KiCad project. Now, you may ask, why I would like to know about KiCad project? What do you think? Several reasons. For example, KiCad is becoming more and more popular, and you really would like to watch what is happening with this software, because it may not be so far away from becoming quite real competitor to the paid and expensive softwares which are used for schematic design and PCB layout. So you really would like to watch what is happening in KiCad. Also, I noticed more and more companies are actually starting to use KiCad. And if you decide to use KiCad, if you decide to invest your time into a project created in KiCad, then maybe you would like to know if KiCad is going to be still around, or if they are going to continue development, or if KiCad is always going to be free. Yeah, if you start creating your project in KiCad, and you may be wondering if no one is going to buy them in 2-3 years, because otherwise you would have to pay for the software to get access to your projects. We have seen this happen in past. So I was really wondering, like, if you go and if you start using KiCad, can something like this happen? And there are more questions, because if you start using KiCad professionally, you would like to know, for example, who will decide or how they decide on implementing new features. If they have some kind of plan, if they have some kind of goal, or it's like complete mess and anyone can implement any kind of feature what they want, because it is open source project. So basically anyone can contribute, but is it how it works? So I have got like many questions, and what I did, I sent an email to Wayne. Wayne is one of the main authors of KiCad. He's currently the project leader, and I asked Wayne all these questions. He was so kind. He found some free time. We made a call. I recorded this call, and in this video I'm going to play the questions and answers. And I really hope you will find them interesting, you will find them helpful, and I really hope I ask all the kind of questions what you may have. So here it is. Here are the parts, the interesting parts from my call with Wayne. My very first question to Wayne was, how good KiCad is. Can you design like any kind of board in KiCad? And here is his answer.
But to give you an idea, I always somewhat think that the people who say KiCad isn't usable for professional development don't quite understand the capabilities, because we do have users. I know at least 2 that do 26-layer boards, very high density designs in their day job. So the idea that KiCad isn't capable of doing professional level designs is, I think it's a little unfounded. Now, admittedly, KiCad doesn't have some of the a lot of the what you call enterprise level features, like MRP integration, things of that nature. We aren't quite. It's going to be a while before we get there. But as far as actually schematic capture and board layout, I think functionally we're pretty competitive. And with, each new version, we close the gaps down in terms of, what we can do and what we can't do.
I'm going to interrupt the call for a moment because I would like to point out, if you have tried KiCad before, but if you have tried like older version of KiCad, maybe you got the feeling that there are some features missing. However, from my call with Wayne, I found out that if you really would like to get feeling about this new KiCad which is coming, you should download the latest nightly build of the software, because this one is going to include all the kind of features which are going to be in KiCad number 6. And these features what we are talking about, these may be the features what are going to make difference between what KiCad used to be and what it is becoming. And when we will be talking in this video about KiCad, usually Wayne is going to refer to this new version, KiCad 6, which is coming. If you would like to download it, you can just click on download, then select the operating system or distribution and go down here, nightly development builds, click here and you can download it here. When you install this KiCad version, it will still say 5 point something, but basically you are trying the version of KiCad which is going to become KiCad number 6. KiCad 6, if I understand right, it doesn't exist yet. It will exist when they release the feature, when they release the software. What I would like to also point out, another thing, when using different CAD systems, some people they found it limiting that some of the CAD systems, they only work, for example, on Windows. I could be specific, but I don't have to be specific. Many people, they complain like, oh, I'm running Linux, or I use Mac and I would like to run this CAD software, but I can't use it because it's not supported. KiCad, it is actually supported on all the kind of operating systems and distribution, and I wanted to know a little bit more about this, so I asked Wayne how it is with support in KiCad for Linux, for Mac OS, and for Windows. And here is his answer.
It's great, yes, and all three platforms are supported equally. In other words, there's no functional difference between the platforms. There's only your normal look and feel. So we do our best to try to use the native operating system widgets in as much as we can, so that KiCad kind of looks correct on each platform. Of course, that's never 100% possible, but I think we do a pretty good job of doing that. So if you're familiar with, your normal Windows application, then KiCad on Windows will feel somewhat like a Windows application, as close as we can. So,
okay, when you are saying about these possible compatibility issues, is it only about the software and GUI, or is it also about the project which you create?
It's just projects. If you want to pick a project up on let's say you worked on a project on Linux, right? You want to have all the same libraries. It's when you start customizing. If you use a default install all the time, then you probably won't have any problems. But if you start adding custom libraries, but footprint and symbol libraries, custom 3D objects, those have to exist in the same places on each platform where KiCad looks for them, right? And where those get stored on each platform will vary by platform. So that's one of the critical, it's really just the configuration of the platform. But as far as user usability, no, there's no difference. It's just if you want to work on the same project with 3 different platforms, then there's some configuration that you have to do, and that would be true of any application. I don't think that's just true necessarily of KiCad, but anytime you create an application that's cross-platform, it definitely increases the complexity of what you have to do. Now, if you're only ever going to, if you're just a Windows only shop and all you ever do is use Windows, then, you just set up all your machines the same and you're good to go.
But if you create the schematic and if you create PCB, and when you just take this project, then you can simply open it on different platforms. That's no problem.
Yeah, yes, you can do that. It's no problem. But where you run into issues is when there's missing libraries. When you go to, like, say, one of the features is you can update symbols or update footprints from the library.
Yeah,
so
I understand it. But
if you don't have the
you may have
original
same problem even if you use same platform, but move it to different computer, for example.
Yes, but that problem becomes geometrically more complex as you add three different operating systems. So it's not, so it is a little bit more difficult in terms of setup, but in terms of functionality, no, you can certainly open up and read it. You can even modify it with libraries you have on your machine that may not be on the original machine, but then you're right back to when you take it back to the other machine, then you're back to the same problem. So yeah, library and library management's kind of always been a universal issue with EDA. That's not a new problem. It's been around as long as there's been EDA, as far as I remember.
So is like one of the solutions to make some kind of project packager or something?
We do have that coming up in version 6, where we can actually archive everything that's required for a project, and you could just take the archives compressed. You can take it among machines and then open the archive and then open the project. So
and then everything will work.
Yes, everything will work just fine. Yeah,
perfect. So my second question, what I may know about is, we were talking about schematics. You said you can open as many schematic pages as you want. You can use as many symbols and pins, but how easy or how difficult it is actually to work with, I don't know, let's say 50 pages? How easy it is to find specific net or to see where a specific net is connected to what pins, and this kind of work, which is very important for more complex projects.
KiCad has several features that allow you. We have a net highlighting feature, which allows you to. So when you highlight a net, it'll highlight across pages, assuming the net crosses pages. We also have a find tool, which allows you to find by string and wildcards. So if you're looking for, and it will descend into the hierarchy to find, you can restrict search to the current page or the current sheet, or you can descend the entire hierarchy, search the entire hierarchy.
I haven't tried this. Is it like then results is like a list of all the pages where?
No, if you just hit next, the find dialog is modeless. So if you just hit like next, find next instance of a search string, it will just take you to that page and then select and highlight that object.
Mm-hmm. I will need to have a look at this.
Yeah,
but this is one of the things what, if you work on more complex projects, you would like to be like, it has to be very comfortable to browse through the schematic and find these kind of things. Okay, and what about PCB? So in PCB, basically, you can design. Can we say you can design any board in PCB?
I mean, some things will be. I don't know what would be with version 5.1. The biggest limitation right now, I think, with 5.1 is the minimal design rules that you have available. So you have net classes, and you can have the clearances for net classes. It's pretty simple and basic, but for version 6, which will be released hopefully sometime early next year, we're going to have complex, design rules similar to what most of your major board packages have. So you can say you can have a net and then it's got its own design language, similar to what other packages offer. It will have its own editor that will do the checking with syntax highlighting and all that stuff. And then you'll be able to do things like nested and conditional type operations on your design rules. So it's going to be it should be as powerful as anything else out there, I think.
So basically you can create rules based on objects and some operations between these objects.
Yep. Your normal Boolean type logic operations. You can combine them into complex rules and then reuse them later. It's very full featured.
And if people would like to try it, they can install.
You can go to the KiCad website and download a nightly build. Nightly builds are currently installable side by side with the current stable build. They effectively use a separate configuration folder. So going forward now, 5.1 it will preserve your current stable settings, and then you'll have just a new version setting. So once we start working on version 7, then your version 6 settings won't get messed. So you should be technically able to install as many versions of, stable versions of KiCad side by side that you want. And I encourage people to try the nightly builds. One of the things we do is try to keep nightly builds fairly usable and fairly stable. I don't recommend you use them for new designs unless you have a need for a specific feature that the next version will have available, because what happens is we make, as we add new features, we make changes to the file formats, and those aren't backwards compatible. In other words, you can't take a version 6, version 5 board file and open it with version 4. There have been enough changes made that you have to, if you want to, the next time, you can always open an older, version 4 board with a version 5 of KiCad, but once you save it, then if there's any new features that get rolled into the board file, you're not going to be able to open it with version 4. So, and I don't know too many applications that actually do that very well, because version 4 doesn't know anything about the new features. So we wouldn't be able to render the board in a meaningful way.
It's many different softwares. They do it exactly the same way. That once they add new features and some new information into the file, there is no way the old version is going to open it correctly.
Right.
So it's normal, and especially in your case when new version is going to be free anyway, then install the latest version.
Yep. There's no penalty for using the new file format.
So this would be my next question. If I decide to use KiCad for my company, so I would need to be sure that when I start building all my project and libraries and everything around KiCad, I need to be sure that it's not a trap. Like in 1 or 2 years, I will suddenly find out that I will have to pay for the software, or I will have to pay subscription, or someone will buy you, and then I'm like, oh, yeah.
Well,
so
that question, I get asked that question a lot, and I always tell people, I always say, proprietary software isn't without risk. I mean, I think back, I've been an engineer for over 30 years, and I've seen a lot of software EDA packages come and go, right? They either went bankrupt, they got bought out by another company, and then they stopped supporting that file format. So you were forced to upgrade. Most recently, the Autodesk purchase of Eagle and So even proprietary tools are risky. There's always risk involved. I mean, now I can tell you this much from just a licensing standpoint on KiCad. All of KiCad is written under the GPL3, the GNU General Public License, version 3 or later, which basically means that if anybody wanted to charge for the software, they could, but the software would always be freely available. And if they made any changes to that software would have to be made freely available so that the KiCad project can look at it. So we would be able to cherry pick whatever we wanted from there. Otherwise, they'd be violating from their code back into the mainline program, because if they didn't, they would be violating the terms of the source code license. So there's a certain amount of security in that. The only other thing I ever see the only other way that could change is that if every contributor who ever contributed to KiCad would decide to agree to change the licensing of all the code they wrote from GPL to some proprietary license. I can tell you for a fact, I would never do that with any of my code. And I know for a fact that CERN, who was one of our larger contributors, they would never do that. And I know the other three or four main developers that I know of, I'm also pretty sure they would never do that. So I think the risk of somebody hijacking KiCad and then making it a subscription based or pay to play type business model, I don't see that. I don't think that would be feasible.
I'm going to interrupt the call because we kept talking about licensing for a little bit more. If you would like to learn about differences between these licenses, you can just search on internet. But basically, I was very interested to know if someone can buy KiCad if they decide, but it looks like it would be like super complicated to ask people to pay for KiCad or to pay even for add-ons or some plugins. So this was like really, really good news. Then I was very interesting to know how they decide what new features are going to be implemented. And that's what Wayne is going to talk about next.
Well, there's several ways it happens. We have all the developers on the lead development team of KiCad, they're all professional engineers, all of them. And they really do have a good understanding of what's available from other companies. Almost all of them use other software in their day jobs. So they know what features work. They know what features they don't like. They know what features they like, but don't like the way they work. And so we tend to pick from the pool of the lead development team. We do take input from our user base as well. So we try to put together a roadmap for each new development version of things that we want to try to get accomplished for that version. Like all software development, it doesn't always work out that way. But what's interesting is sometimes you get surprised where like the new DRC feature that wasn't even on the list for version 6, but somebody got it done. So you have two different things that at work. You have the goals of the project, and then of course you have individuals who are actually going to implement those. So KiCad's pretty much volunteer, almost 100% volunteer these days. So it goes by what that person wants to implement. But there is cooperation. It's not just, I'm going to do what I want to do. I think the lead development team's aware of where KiCad is, has shortcomings, and we try to address those as soon as we can, given the manpower that we have.
Yeah, because this would be my worry. Like if every engineer is going to implement their own features, it may end up like kind of messy.
Well,
I would imagine, because managing project is like super complicated.
yes.
That's why I'm asking this.
Well,
because
any new feature development, it somewhat depends on the complexity. There's some features that are fairly simple, so we don't write necessarily, we might have like a short document that says we wanted to do this, this, and this, and then we just leave the implementation up to the engineer. But bigger, more complicated features like the DRC code, there was actually a design document, and then the whole team has input to the design document, and then we finalize it, and then the person or people who are going to implement it go away and do their thing, follow the design document. So it's not just haphazard. No.
So it's not like, okay, I'm going to do today this feature and just we have this new feature.
No, it doesn't work that way. Yeah, any new feature has to. I mean, even the lead development team, who kind of has free reign to do what they want to do, they all work under the understanding that I'm gonna pull. If somebody came up and just had this new feature and it was completely out of left field and they tried to commit it to the repo, I would tell them to take it out till we reviewed it. It's not like we're, nobody gets blindsided by somebody just committing a new feature to the, and that's kind of that's all understood. That's understood when so when we bring a new developer on, that's all a new lead developer onto the team, that's all understood ahead of time. You can't just do what you want whenever you want. That's not how the team works.
That's important to know. So who decide on the new features? Whole team, or is there like one person who will say like the final word? Yes, we are going to implement
the whole
this.
team has input. Like I said, it's amazing how much agreement there is amongst the team. Like I said, because we all do this or either have done this for a living or do this for a living, we all know what needs to be done. So, but in the end, as the project leader, I have the final say. I'm kind of the benevolent dictator, if you will. But I don't really think there's been too many times where it's been really nobody could agree on something. We always come to a consensus, and project runs fairly smoothly. I'm always surprised that it does as well as it does, given what I've seen with some other projects. And I think that's just due to the fact that, like I said, everybody on the team is an engineer. They all design electronics for a living. So they know what works and what doesn't. And they have a pretty good idea.
Sometimes I see differences between different engineers. Like, for example, someone who is starting with hardware design, they may think like they are missing a different kind of feature comparing to someone who is doing layout every day, 10 hours, and they may see a different kind of feature much more valuable than people what are doing, for example, PCB layout only occasionally. So this is something and problem what I've seen also in different CAD systems is because there are like many people what are doing this hardware design just occasionally, and they can make some kind of pressure like we need this feature, or so many people need this feature, but it may be like useless feature.
Yes. So, well, we're all, believe me, I'm perfectly aware of that situation. I think it's pretty obvious from people's designs whether they're a full-time designer or not. I mean, if you've been around in this business long enough, a good design when you see it. So it's not that we don't listen to our hobbyist users. It's just that they don't carry the same weight as like the guy who has the two users that we have that lay out the 26 layer boards. You know,
Yeah.
those guys are great for testing performance. You know, they really push the limits of what KiCad can do. So it's very, and that's what these guys do all day long, every day. That's their job. And so people like that, we know who they are. We usually have direct contact with them. And yes, their opinions carry some weight.
That's important. That's good to know.
But yeah,
So
because I try to avoid the feel good features or the, you know, it's, I understand, you know, and, you know, for the most part, you know, board, I know there's the guys that like the artistic stuff to do the, you know, fancy curved boards and like the key, and that's great. I love that stuff, but, and you can do that stuff in KiCad, but that's never going to be the target market. Yeah, that's never going to be our target user.
yeah.
You know? Now I want to keep KiCad easy enough to use that you can, you know, crank out a board real quick for, you know, prototyping purposes or whatever. That's always a good goal. But in the end, we're going to steadily move towards the professional EDA user. Just each new version will close that gap. Yeah.
Okay. So my next question: when you will be implementing all these new features, how you are going to be sure that, for example, the GUI is consistent all around the software? So when someone will update to new version, they will not be like, oh, I don't know how to use it.
Well, that's a very difficult one. KiCad's always been a little bit inconsistent in that over the years, the user interface has been updated by many different people. So there's definitely some places where the UI is really good, and there's some places where the UI is not as good. But over the years, we've cleaned a lot of that up. There's still a few corner cases and some bits and pieces that are still lurking around in KiCad that are a little crufty, but on the whole, it's funny you should say that. We're right now we hired a professional image designer for our toolbar bitmaps and just the KiCad bitmaps, and it's amazing. Just you hear the people howling. just you know, nobody likes the new, but now they're consistent. We have a consistent color palette. We have a consistent design theme. You know, before the icons were just made by different people, right? So every icon had its, and some of them were really good, but they were like all over the place. So we're starting to address those needs now. So
because
maybe at some point in the future, we can hire a UI designer to help us clean up some of our UI issues. But that's always a little bit more tricky. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's always a bit more tricky because we have to deal with cross-platform, and that makes things a little different because the way things work on a Mac and the way things work on a Windows and the way things work on Linux are all a little different. So it's hard to make it perfect when you're dealing with all three platforms, but you know, we do our best, you know, to be consistent.
Because this is what I see like a big problem when, for example, documentation is created, or when people create tutorials or write a book about how to use KiCad. Now, when you make these big changes, then everything is going to be out of date, you know, like this. And how people will decide to use KiCad in future, how they can be sure that they are not going to be these like huge changes anymore. So they can like start creating tutorials and they will know everyone will be able to use same tutorial even after 5 years.
Well, 5 years is an awfully long time in software life. But from version to version, there's usually not huge changes. There's just small incremental changes. You know, occasionally we rearrange bit. Usually I think we've dropped a couple tools from toolbars that aren't used very often. So to free up some room, because KiCad's tool palette's pretty big, so that's always an issue. But we've added new features. It's hard to keep things that look exactly the same, although we don't generally from version to version. If you were comfortable with the last version, you're probably going to be comfortable with the next version. It's usually if you go like two versions or 3 versions, then you're going to see some pretty huge differences in the way KiCad works. And that's just because of the natural improvement of software. I mean, even proprietary people get this. I mean, I don't know how many times in the past where somebody would buy one of the big EDA packages, would buy somebody else's board layout tool, and they would just stick it in their package, right? And so you had the schematic capture part of the package looked one way, the board layout package looked a different way. You could tell they were 2 completely, separate programs.
It's one of my notes in my list. Like I noticed the same. So basically, you are making everything to be consistent and used the same way. And so now it's the time when basically KiCad is taking its kind of final form.
Yes. I mean, now in the future, we may, one of the things that's been requested in the future, which would be radically different, is a tabbed user interface. So you can open multiple schematic pages in tabs and then have another tab for the board editor instead of having it in a separate window.
That would be big difference.
But that's going to be huge, right? So, but that's a few years down the road, because now if we did it, we make the tabs detachable. So you could drag one off to the side and then you could have a separate window like you do now, but it would be different. There's not any question that user interface paradigm.
But I don't mind when it opens in different window for me.
Yeah, everybody has.
It's actually fine because it's easy to
put on different monitors.
Yeah,
that's what most people do. That's what I do. Yeah, put your schematic on one monitor, your board on the other monitor. So when you use the highlighting, you can see you click on a net in the schematic, you can see a highlight in the board editor, and vice versa. You click on and highlight a net in the board editor, you can see it show up in the schematic editor.
I would even in Altium or in different software, I prefer to have like 2 different windows, not like making one software across the 2 monitors, but one window on one monitor and the other one on the other monitor.
Yeah, I think that's pretty common use case.
Okay, now about the, I know some companies, they support KiCad, like you already mentioned CERN, but maybe, some other companies, they also donate some or contribute with financially. How much influence these companies have on KiCad development? Like, can they decide what kind of feature is going to be implemented, or
Well, there's several ways that works, and there's the standard donation model in KiCad, and there's 2 donation platforms. We have donations through CERN. They were our original benefactor way back in 2007, 8. I think that's when they came on. And those donations are anonymous. We don't know who donates them unless somebody tells us. And those just help pay developers. So what happens is, say somebody's working on a new feature, they create a work package, and then they bid on it, and then the monies are approved or not approved, and then they get a purchase order from CERN, and then they can get paid to implement that. But they have no control over what that gets. The work package goes for. They only can control whether, it's, so basically you can get paid to write KiCad software, but you have to work within so I have the final approval of all work packages. So I say, no, this isn't something we're going to use in KiCad, or yeah, that's, and then there's also the Linux Foundation, which also you donate through Linux Foundation. And the reason we have two of them is, unfortunately, CERN only allows us to use donations for software development. So if we want to do something like hire an icon developer, we can't do that through CERN. We have to do that through the Linux Foundation. Or if we want to have the lead development team get together for a week for hackathon, like I can pay for travel expenses, stuff like that. So I can do that through Linux Foundation donations, which CERN doesn't really allow me to do. So, so those are your two donation models. There's also a third option, and that's the KiCad Services Corporation. So that was founded by myself, actually by Seth Hilbrand, and I'm also working for KiCad Services Corporation. The goal of KiCad Services Corporation is to do paid work directly, as well as revenue sharing with other vendors, so that we can fund full-time development of KiCads. So that's the goal of that company. And so KiCad Services Corporation you can contact them directly for direct implementation of a new feature in KiCad. There's also a contract, support contracts. So if say you want to have somebody to be able to pick up the phone and say, or answer a question within 24 hours rather than going to the user forum for information or help. So we do offer direct help for corporate users or individuals. I mean, we have support contracts available for those users because that was one of the questions that came up a lot as well, if I buy Altium or I buy Eagle, I can go to their website and I can get somebody. Now I don't know how true that is or not, but I can get help whenever I need it, right? So that KiCad Services Corporation has closed that gap. We now offer support, paid professional support for KiCad.
What if there is like company what decides, oh, we love KiCad, we would like to use it in our company, but we are missing this specific feature. Let's give KiCad $10,000 and let's ask them to make this feature happen. Does it mean the feature will be like automatically approved, or if it's not?
Well, I wouldn't take a bid to implement something that wasn't on our list. We have yet to have anybody offer to pay for development of something that's not already on the list. We've had several companies inquire about importers. So some of those have been paid. Some of those have been done for pay. I think we've been inquired about IPC 2851, I believe it is, implementing that. So we're thinking about that.
That's the output or type of?
Yeah. And we will basically, if another company contracts us to write something, it's going to be something that's already on the list. Like I said, that list is, we know just from our own experience what needs to be on the list. So we haven't, like I said, no companies come to us and said, hey, could you guys implement this feature? And we're like, oh, we never thought of that. Yeah, most of the lead development team knows what features need to be implemented. So,
okay.
So yeah, so what we do offer that is available through KiCad Services Corporation. And if it's something completely new, then you'd have to that would be a discussion to have with me and the lead development team.
So it's still possible if the feature would be like beneficial and you approve that, it's going to be nice feature to have, then you...
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, that's something we would absolutely do. Somebody came to us and said, hey, here's this really great feature. I think KiCad should have it, and I'm willing to pay somebody to implement it. Yes, there'll be no problem doing that.
Okay.
Assuming it fit, it wasn't something that didn't have anything to do with laying out a board package. But assuming that it was in the realm of normal EDA, yeah, I don't see that being an issue.
Okay, you already mentioned importers. So this is one of the big things, basically, because many reference designs are in different CAD software. Or if people would like to move to KiCad, so how good it is with support for all the kind of different import?
It depends. The Eagle board support is pretty good. The schematic support is a little less great. The nested sheets isn't correct when you import an Eagle schematic, so that's a little problematic. I was hoping to get that done for 6. It's not going to be, but it's on my list for things to get done for 7. Altium, the Altium importer is very good. The board importer does a great job, and the schematic importer is coming along really well. So we have somebody that actually works on that. That's kind of his pet project. So it does pretty good. I think the Altium support is very good. Now there's some of there's some third-party configurations like the output configuration tools that Altium has, and some of the other stuff doesn't port directly over to KiCad because KiCad doesn't support that yet. But I'm sure once KiCad does support those things, that we'll port that over. There's also CADStar. CADStar. There's a good CADStar importer. That's pretty good as well.
What about Cadence?
That one, I think I think they export to something else and then so they export
they do the IPC standard export maybe, and then you can import it.
It might be that way, yeah. But we're doing that. We don't have a direct Cadence importer. We don't have that yet. I know that's kind of on our list of ones to implement. They can be really difficult. Like the Altium is a binary file format, and it takes a lot of work to reverse engineer that.
And when they change it,
yep, then we have to figure out what they added or changed. Yeah, so it's not trivial. But yeah, that's one thing you don't have to worry about with KiCad. Our file formats will always be plain text.
Yeah, I think the new IPC standard, I forgot the number. I will try to find it, but I know it's now being implemented with some of the CAD softwares, and it's kind of universal because it can include all the information about everything.
Schematics and boards. Yeah, it's very generic, and we'll see how it works in real world. But that's definitely on our short list for version 7. So the next version after the current one.
Okay. So next question. I always keep saying board design is not only about schematic and PCB. It is also about, for example, component management, bill of materials. It's about the libraries. So can we talk a little bit about this? Like, let's start with libraries.
Okay, we'll start with libraries. That's one place in the last couple of years, KiCad's made a huge improvement. Our default library set, I think I want to say it's up to 1.3 gigabytes compressed or uncompressed. I can't remember. So if you take all the symbol libraries, all the footprint libraries, and all the 3D models, it's a lot of data.
How consistent these footprints and symbols, how they are created?
The symbols and footprints are very consistent. We have a couple of years ago, we wrote a document called the KiCad Library Convention. It's a document that documents everything from silkscreen sizes, clearances, how to generate footprints, a lot of the standard footprints are actually generated by a script. So all those, and so any submissions, like say you have a symbol that's not in our symbol library, you can contribute, but all your contributions have to follow the library document, and the people who run that do a real good job of bringing new users on board and helping them get up to speed, and so they can learn how to contribute symbols and footprints that follow the standard. So one thing that you will notice now, pretty much across all the KiCad libraries, is they're very consistent. Symbols, footprints, the naming convention, the way they're laid out, they're across the board really, really consistent. There may be a few older libraries that may still haven't been brought up to date yet, but yeah, for the most part, very, very good.
How is it with support from other companies what provide symbols and footprints?
So right now, I don't know if you saw the announcement recently, SnapEDA announced that they have a tool that allows you to integrate libraries directly into KiCad from their library, which is pretty convenient. I haven't used it yet, but they have a nice demo video of it in action. So you can always go to their website and take a look at it. They have a very large library of symbols, footprints, and 3D models that's very high quality. You can, and then of course there's a lot of I know DigiKey does, and I know Octopart has substantial number of they now support KiCad as far as downloading symbols and footprints and 3D models. Now, obviously, if you download a footprint or a symbol from DigiKey or from Octopart or from SnapEDA, they have their own library conventions. They won't look exactly like the KiCad libraries.
Yeah. Okay. What about parameters? Now I'm going to explain. Basically, when you create a component is usually symbol, footprint, and some information, some parameters about this component, like part number, manufacturer, but it can include also things like supplier part number. So when you create BOM, bill of material, then and when you use this kind of component in your project, then you can very simply generate these bill of materials with all the information which you just need to, for example, buy the components. How is it with support of these parameters?
KiCad supports that in that you have to manually add that information. So like the symbol libraries in the footprint library, well, most of that information will be in the symbol library. That's not included with the standard libraries. And the reason we don't do that is so field names like part number, manufacturer part number, vendor part number, everybody has a different way of labeling those, right? Some people use shortcuts, some people spell it out all the way. So when you do that, you end up with bill of materials that are mismatched, right? So we avoid doing that just so that we don't run into that problem. Now, as far as being able to add that information to your schematic, yeah, you can do that. You can add any, the number of fields is unlimited. You can add as many fields as you want, give them the names. We actually have a templating system that allows you to do it in bulk, right? So you can add that field to every symbol in the project or in a schematic. And then you end up filling in the information in itself. Now, we don't have a way to automatically import that information yet. That's probably not going to happen until version 7, but we're working on that. But we do have BOM tools as well. One thing we've done is we found that we used to have a BOM tool that was written that was in KiCad, but nobody could ever agree what a BOM looks like, right? Everybody has their own idea of what a bill of material output should look like. So we made a generic XML file, which you can post-process. So you can either use XSLT-proc, which is a XML post-processor, and it's just like a scripting language that allows you to, convert it to CSV files or, whatever file format you want. And there's also Python, so you can use Python as a scripting language. And
so you
Python
would write
really
this Python script in KiCad directly, or?
No, they're external. You just run them from KiCad.
So you have to write
your own scripts, and then you can run them from KiCad. So if you go into the schematic, you open up the BOM tool, it'll allow you to add new scripts. And we supply KiCad with the default scripts that do the normal things like create a CSV file, like one part per line, if you have like 10 of the same part, they can put them all in one line. We have those types of outputs available already. But if you want to do anything more complicated than that, like you could write a Python BOM script to, ping DigiKey's website and see if they're available. Do you have these parts available? How much they cost? You could do things like that with Python.
So you can just open the example, see how it is written, and you can, for example, modify.
Yeah, you can make a copy of any of the KiCad examples and the supplied ones, and then say, oh yeah, I can add this to it and add that to it. Yeah, it's very flexible.
So basically, you don't even need to generate Excel file or something. You can use this script directly, and it will generate, for example, CSV file, and then you can open it in Excel. And
Yep.
Okay.
And you can do things much more elaborate if you have the Python skills to do so. You can, sky's the limit. As good as your Python coding skills are, you can, once you parse the standard XML format that has all the information embedded in it, what you do with that information is, up to your, you could even use that to, integrate with your MRP system if you wanted to.
It's very nice.
Yeah.
And when we are talking about this, what or how the different versions of symbols and footprints are handled by KiCad? Sometimes happen, you have a footprint and a little bit later you find out, oh, I need to make this a little bit smaller or a little bit bigger. What will happen? Do you need to create new footprint and then use it, or
There's multiple ways you can address that inside the board editor. You can update the library and then go ahead. That's probably the easiest way. Let's say you have 20 components with that footprint, right? You need to update them all. The best way to do it would be to update the library and then refresh all the footprints, from the library.
So there is nothing like the old board will still use the previous version of the footprint.
Yes. One of the things that as an engineer, especially working in some of the industries I've worked in, where you don't want the board to change without you knowing about it, right? You don't want to open up a board and all of a sudden it looks different, right?
Exactly.
So it's a manual operation. But maybe some point we'll add a feature to go through and check to see if any of them changed against their libraries and say, hey, this one's different. Do you want to update it? We don't have anything that sophisticated yet, but we have tools that make, updating, large numbers of footprints simple. And if it's just one footprint, let's say it's the only footprint in the board that's like that, you can edit it in place. You just open up in the footprint editor and make whatever changes and then save it back to the board. And then doesn't change the one in your library unless you export it.
So you only make the changes in the board.
You can do one thing KiCad tries not to do is to impose a workflow. In other words, we try to leave the workflow up to the user. In other words, we're not going to say you have, in order to update a footprint, you have to update it in the library first and then go back into the editor and then update it in the editor. We let you do, we let you work how you want to work. KiCad is very good about that. It's not, it's one of my kind of pet peeves, because if you've ever sat down and watched board designers, everybody has their own little personal workflow, right? So I don't like the board EDA packages that have a forced workflow.
I understand.
You got to do this. You got to do it this way. This is the only way you can do it, right? Yeah, it makes it easier to do, but not everybody works that way. So we try to avoid enforced workflows.
What about symbols? Is it same as with footprints?
Symbols is the same way.
So you can update, or you can modify only the symbol which is already placed in the schematic, or you can modify symbol in library and then synchronize your schematic with the library, or?
Yes. Yeah. Now with version 5.1, things are a little different because the libraries, I don't want to get into a long discussion about that was always a design flaw, but after version 6, yes, it'll work the same way as the board editor. You can update it in the library and then tell it to update all the symbols in the schematic. You can update the schematic in place, just one symbol at a time. And so, yeah, you don't have to do it either way.
Okay.
But yes, the schematic, the symbol will open with the last symbol that you use. So when you open a schematic, the symbols will be the last ones that you embedded in the schematic.
So it's not going to automatically synchronize with libraries or something?
No.
Okay. Because I think when I open a schematic, I've seen a message telling me something.
Rescue?
Yeah.
A rescue? Yeah. That's the old version. Version 5.1 and older will have that in it. The only time you'll see that message in version 6 is when you're importing a legacy design and you need to do a rescue one last time. Version 6, the symbols are embedded in the schematic.
Perfect. Great. And when we are talking about these different versions, so how is it with versioning support, or how engineers can use versioning of the board files, or collaborate through versioning with different people?
Okay, well, versioning, one thing KiCad has tried to do, we don't always get it 100% correct, but we do our best to keep, because the file for all our file formats are plain text, they do work well with versioning software like Git or Subversion. We do our best to keep the change sets reasonably sensible, so that when you look at the differences between the last version and the next version, they make it's minimal. We try to keep the versioning differences to a minimum. Almost all our users that I'm aware of use some type of version control software to maintain their projects.
It's not directly implemented in the software. You have to do it or apply on the project directory or something.
Yes, it's an external. And there's a reason for that. We've run into issues where everybody has their own preferred versioning software. So if we would integrate, say, I know for a fact that the lead development team, we all use Git. We're all comfortable with it. That would be the first choice. But I don't think Git's necessarily the best choice for a board developer. Git has a steep learning curve. It's really complicated, but I mean, it's incredibly powerful. But so we've avoided direct integration into KiCad just for that reason. Maybe at some point we'll create an abstraction layer so that people can implement different types of version control software. We've talked about that in the past, but right now KiCad, like I said, because KiCad is all the file formats are plain text. They version really nice. So this way you can use whatever version control software you're most comfortable with.
But there is still possibility like one person can work on one page of the schematic and create new version. Other one can just upload this new version and it will work perfectly fine.
Yes. Yeah. As long as the person checks out the change, you're going to have to pull the changes into your local to work on them. But yeah, it should work fine. There should be no problem with that.
What about different kind of collaboration? Like what if more people would like to work on one PCB or...
Yeah, that's something we've talked about that. We actually have an infrastructure in place at least for the board packages, at least for the board editor, not so much for the schematic editor, but we have this commit tool, which you commit changes. So anytime any of the editors, like the router or you make changes to a footprint or whatever, those go through a single interface in the board package. There's been talk about turning those commits into strings that we save to a file. So you can basically replay all your editing. So if we do that, we thought that maybe at some point in the future, we could, if two people were doing those interactively, you could interleave those. And as long as they didn't conflict with each other, you could have two people edit the board at the same time. But
really, like you can merge them together?
As long as there's no conflict between the two, like if the next merge doesn't conflict with anything that's in front of it, you should be able to do it. But that's something that we have to think about. That's not a trivial.
I don't really know many companies what would be like what would have more people working on one PCB at the same time. So it's okay. I do know, for example, even I often use it, control or copy and paste between different boards. So how does this, is it okay? Like you open two boards in KiCad, you select something in one board, Control C, place it to the other one.
Yes, you can do that.
That's perfect.
Version 6 is very flexible in that regard because we just basically copy things to the clipboard in the same file format version. So you're basically just copying pieces of the file to another file. So, of course you have to sometimes you have to clean up, reference designators and, you have to do conflict resolution just like you would.
But you can use, for example, you can copy only tracks if you don't want to copy.
Yeah, we have selection filtering. There's selection filtering built into. So if you look at the new version 6 of KiCad, there's a selection filter box in the bottom. You can just select tracks, and the only thing the selecting tool will do is select tracks. You can just copy all the tracks, copy them somewhere else.
This version 6 looks like really, really good one. Or
well, we say that every version because every version's. We just add a bunch of new features. Each new version gets better and better. We improve the features that we already have, and then we add new features. And it's just and that's kind of how the KiCad development works. It's just a steady evolution of the. It's. I always say it's a marathon, not a sprint. We're trying to go to an annual model where we have a release once a year. So a new version comes out every year. We'll see how that works. We released 5.1 at March of last year, or March of this year. So hopefully 6 will be sometime around March of 2021.
Okay, so my last question. What are you the most proud of?
Boy, that's a hard question. There's so many things. I'm proud of our team. I'm really proud of our development team. When I started with KiCad in 2007, it was just basically three 3 developers working on KiCad. And now we have probably about 7 or 8 regular contributors. We have people who've really stepped up. The library team does a wonderful job. They're just really good. We have people that manage the build. We have auto builders. So like anytime we commit a change to the source repo, the auto builders fire off, and usually within 24 hours you have that next version available. Within 24 hours, you can go download it and run it, check out the new features. The team of people that we pulled together to do all that work, it's really amazing to me. And I'm just proud how far the project's come. It was a little project that nobody hardly ever heard of in 2007. And now when I did go to shows, we're not going to shows these days, but a lot of the board vendors are talking about, 25, 35% of their orders are KiCad boards designed with KiCad. So that, 10 years ago, that would have been a couple percent. So we're making inroads. We're getting better every day. We're pushing what's possible for an open source project. And yeah, I think we're doing well.
Very nice. Okay, is there something what you would like to say in the video? Or we are basically finished. So
yeah, I'd like to take the time to thank all the members of the KiCad team for their hard work. I'd like to thank all of our users for their support and our donors. I'd like to thank all of our big corporate donors whose contributions have made a difference. And I'd like to thank all those people who help the KiCad infrastructure, like Snap EDA and DigiKey, who provide footprints and symbols. It shows me that people are taking KiCad seriously, and that they must have a significant user base for them to take the time to do that. And I want to thank you, Robert, for inviting me on your show. It's pretty cool. It's fun. I do a lot of stuff that's like inside that everybody already knows about KiCad. So it's nice to be able to reach out to people who are outside the normal KiCad circles.
So nice words. I would like to thank you very much to Wayne for finding time to answer my questions, and to finding time to help me to create this video, which I really hope you found helpful or at least interesting. Leave comments. Let me know what you think about this kind of video, just talking to different kind of people about all the kind of topics. It doesn't have to be like super technical or educational, just maybe interesting. Okay, leave comments if you like this kind of video. Also, leave comments for Wayne, for KiCad contributors. Let them know what you think about KiCad software. Let them know what you think about the job, what they are doing. Because I really like, it's very hard to find group of people which are or who are creating something just because they would like to create it. They don't do it for money. They don't do it for selling the company or something. They just do it because they like to do it and they would like to help other people. So leave comments. What do you think about this kind of approach, and let them know what you think about this kind of job, what they are doing. If you like this video, don't forget press like button. If you would like to see my future videos, you know exactly what to do. Subscribe, because it is helping me to create these kind of videos. And I would like to thank you very much for watching, and see you next time. Bye!